So I know the year isn't even done yet, but I'm excited for the books that are starting to get announced for 2024. And so today I'm here to share with you the top 10 horror books that are coming out next year that I want to read as soon as possible. If you're new to my channel, I do review a lot of horror, so definitely consider sticking around and subscribing so you want to check back with me once I have reviewed these books and let you know whether or not they're worth your time. But today I'm going to share with you books that I'm excited for that you might want to pre-order yourself or put on hold at the library or just simply have in your own Goodreads TBR. Hopefully these are going to work out and be as good as they sound because I'm really excited for all of these, and let's get started. First, let's talk January, starting with The House of Last Resort by Christopher Golden. And this is a story that follows a couple that decide to move to Italy. There are these small towns where the houses are just being sold for simply €1. These homes are unoccupied, and so they're just trying to get people into those towns to give them a second life. It sounds like an amazing adventure. The couple think it's too good to be true, which of course is always a bad sign in a horror story. But they move there despite warnings from their family, and soon enough when they're in the house, things start to be strange. There's noises, doors that were locked start to open, etc. And they find out that this house has a history. It used to be owned by the church, and apparently the priest there used to be doing some strange things. That's all I know. Hopefully my synopsis is right, as with all of these titles here, but it sounds pretty intriguing. I've read Christopher Golden before, and I'll be honest, he doesn't tend to be a 5-star author for me, but he does tend to write really engaging, easy stories that follow the horror tropes that I really know and love. And again, I always say I'm not a big haunted house fan, but I do love a story where things are just going to go horribly wrong, which does tend to fit the bill for something like this. I love the Italian setting, and especially if it's going to have that Catholic religious angle, that tends to work really well for me. I can't wait to find out the history of this house, and I expect it's going to be terrible. Let's hope. Next, let's talk about The Wretched Valley by Jenny Kiefer. This is a horror story that takes place in the Kentucky wilderness, which I honestly didn't really know there was a wilderness there, but we follow 4 hikers who go out and they disappear, and then I believe 7 months later their bodies are found. However, only 3 of the bodies are found. So the question is, what happened to them and where is the last person? So the bodies that are found are gruesomely murdered, or at least dead in a really horrific way. And then there is one that is missing. The person who is missing is a young woman who also runs an Instagram account, and people online who follow her swear that there are these random strange live streams that keep popping up. So it appears that someone is activating her account, someone is there, and so there's all these rumors going around whether or not she's alive. And of course there's all these big mystery or questions surrounding what happened. Were they murdered by her? Was there some sort of cannibalism that happened, something supernatural? And the story of course will go from there. If you can't tell from the synopsis, this book is very loosely based off of the Dyatlov Pass incident, which is this case very similar where these hikers go missing in the cold wilderness, and there's a question of what happened to them. So I'm fascinated by the true case. So I'm hoping that this will draw similar feelings and kind of that mystery around it, and I definitely want to check it out. Personally, I'm an indoor person. There's a reason that I run a YouTube channel, and so the idea of going hiking out in dangerous conditions sounds absolutely terrifying to me, something I would never do, but I love to read about it for whatever reason. Next is Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona, and this is a new book that is very much inspired by vintage horror movies. So the story is set in October of 1993, where we follow a young teenager who is babysitting for the single mom. They themselves suffer from anxiety disorder, but they're able to cope with that, and they're actually really good at their job. They're a great sitter, and so you follow them on this night as they are playing with the kids. They're watching these spooky horror movies because while she has anxiety, she actually finds it very calming to watch horror movies and finds it a good way to kind of deal with that. And then in the night, someone comes there knocking at their door, and she has to deal with the strangers that arrive there. This is one that I'm very excited about for multiple reasons. I really think it's interesting to read a book that focuses on anxiety because you don't really see that represented, at least very purposely. You definitely have anxious characters in horror stories, don't get me wrong, but to actually label someone or identify someone as having anxiety disorder and have that addressed, I also think I, along with a lot of you I suspect, are going to be excited for someone who is going to use horror movies as a way to cope. I think people who don't watch horror movies are really confused why we like them so much, but if you're like me, when it comes to like the classic classic slasher movies, ones with really familiar tropes, they can be strangely comforting. And so I think it's very believable that someone could seek out rewatching their favorite horror movies as a way to deal with their own anxieties. I think it's completely plausible. I think a lot of us do it ourselves, and I love that as a setup. As for The Strangers at the Door, I'm really hoping it's going to give me similar vibes to the Paul Tremblay book, and I just want to see how it all falls out. I'm hoping it'll just give those vintage horror movie vibes I'm looking for, and I have high hopes for this one. It sounds perfect, so please don't disappoint me. Moving on to March, we have The Woods All Black by Lee Mandello, and this is a story that is set in the 1920s in Appalachia. We follow a young woman, I believe a nun, who is going to this community. She is supposed to do all the things that a nun does in the community. However, there's something sinister about this town. There's something festering, and there's a focus on this one particular unruly tomboy that needs to be put in their place. So this is a book I'm very interested for multiple reasons. Again, I don't typically read a lot of historical horror, but I think it's going to hit me in all the other ways that are going to matter. So I've read this author before. I really loved their novella from this year, as well as Summer Suns, their backlist horror title. And so at this point, I'm interested in reading everything that they do. I love the idea that this one is going to focus on someone who perhaps has a question of their identity in terms of gender. I think it's going to be really topical, really well done. I am completely here for it given the current climate. I think it's the kind of story we need, the kind of conversation I want to see in my fiction right now. And anytime, again, a story crosses over with religious or especially Catholic overtones and criticisms, it tends to be right up my alley. I cannot wait for this one. It sounds great, and I will again report back with my review, hopefully a gushing one, but I'll let you know either way. Next, we have Diavola by Jennifer Marie Thorne. And this is a story that follows a young woman who is just trying to survive a vacation with her family, which I think for a lot of us who have complicated relationships with their family, it can be very interesting to see a premise like this in terms of a setup. I understand that her mother is very overbearing and constantly questioning her life decisions. Sounds like she doesn't get along with her brother or father and so forth, and is just trying to get through it all. That's the basic premise as far as I know, and I suspect there is more to it. I am again intrigued in a story with complicated family dynamics. I imagine it's one where, of course, if it's labeled as a horror story, there's probably some kind of supernatural element going on, but what I'm hoping is that it's going to be a situation where the people are perhaps worse than the actual supernatural elements, because I love stories that criticize relationships and family and get into all that good, dirty, gritty stuff that a lot of us feel but don't actually want to talk about out loud. So I think it's going to be hugely topical, really fun. If it's done well, I will be really excited for this title. Then moving on to April, I want to talk about Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. This is a horror space story that follows a crew that are going off to this planet that has previously been colonized. However, the previous occupants have left very quickly, and so they are going to recolonize it. And of course, in doing so, they want to figure out why they left so quickly and what actually caused them to run away. And so within the story, right at the beginning, it's on the premise of the book, there is a death, and that appears to be perhaps a murder. And so you have the psychologist on this crew that is trying to figure out who is behind it. So this is one of everything on my anticipated list. I'll be honest, this one I'm going into with trepid expectations because of the fact that I have very mixed feelings surrounding Dead Silence. It had great atmosphere and promise, but I didn't feel like it landed the story. I felt like it kind of gave false promises. And so the author, once again, doing a space horror book, I will admit, I'm nervous they're going to do it wrong, but I cannot stop myself from wanting to check it out. I need to try this one and see if it's going to work better than their first one did, because if you know me, I love science fiction, I love horror, and I love when they're mashed together. So I can't not try this book. I'm worried this one will disappoint, but am I going to absolutely read it the second I can get my hands on a copy? Absolutely. Will I be disappointed? I hope not. Next is Immortal Pleasures by V. Castro, and this is a story that follows a woman who hundreds of years ago was a translator for the conquerors that came to their Aztec land. So she herself was seen as a traitor among her people. However, something happened and now they are reborn as a vampire. And so in the present day, they are now seeking vengeance on the people who destroyed their land and culture and are seeking to get back the artifacts that are lost. Now in the story, they head to Dublin looking for certain skulls, and when they are there, they come across two individuals that are perhaps going to be lovers of theirs. There is a man man as well as a vampire both vying for their attention, and the story goes from there. So while I'm classifying this one as horror, it's largely because of that vampire element, but the book does specify that it is described as dark fantasy. The author writes a lot of horror, fantasy, and erotica, and it sounds like it's all smashed together in this one. But I've loved this author's work before, so I'm very hopeful I will love this one as well. I love that they write very feminist stories, and while I don't typically love vampire stories, I don't typically love stories that are heavy in romance, sometimes her work just hits right and breaks those rules and just works when other stories don't. So absolutely want to check this one out. I'm hoping I'll love it as I have many of her previous works, and if anyone is going to make me read a vampire story, it's her. From there, I want to read Occult by Thomas Olde Heuvelt, and this is a story that starts out with children who discover this old abandoned seafaring ship, and something is wrong with it, so the government is called in to investigate, and they call in an expert, particularly an occult expert, to go and see what is going on. And of course, this is a horror story, not just a straight up piece of fiction, and so because of that, there is the question of possibly whatever they have found there, they are opening the doors to the apocalypse, and that man is required now to try to close those doors again and save the world. The premise sounds a little bit ridiculous, over the top, but the author is the reason I'm very excited for this one. I really enjoy Hex. I know it is a mixed bag when it comes to other reviewers, but I like what it's doing, and while I don't think it's a perfect 5-star read for me, I think it's solid, it's smart, it's different, and this book is technically, according to Goodreads, listed as a loose companion sequel to that one. I don't know the comparison, the synopsis sounds totally different, but if it's in the same vein as that one, drawing from the same supernatural elements, I'm completely here for it, and I have high hopes I'm gonna love it. Please, please, please. I've been waiting for more translated work from him ever since Echo. Moving on to May, we have The House That Horror Built by Christina Henry, and this follows a single mother who is desperate for a job, gets the opportunity to clean for a famous movie director, particularly a famous horror movie director, which is fantastic for her because she loves horror movies, and she gets to clean his fancy gothic mansion. She knows that part of this position requires her to be very discreet, so she doesn't ask questions, she doesn't try to prod. He was once this famous director, and his house is filled with the objects from his career, but something happened. There was a tragedy that caused him to stop working, and she knows better than to ask about it. However, something changes when she starts to hear someone in the house possibly calling for help from a locked door, and the story spirals from there. It sounds great. Again, normally haunted house stories aren't my thing, but I think this one is a lot more than that. I love stories that pull in other horror media, and of course, as a love letter to those, you have an ultra horror fan at the center of the story, so hopefully they're going to be a little bit more aware of the tropes and not be as dumb as the average protagonist in these kind of stories as you normally see. So again, I'm really excited for this one, especially because the author, if I haven't said it, Christina Henry, is one of my favorites. She just consistently writes engaging stories. I have pretty much loved everything that she has put out. I just find her stories over and over again to be exciting, fast-paced, engaging, with great characters, great plotting, and a lot of narrative drive, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And finally, in June, we have Cuckoo by Gretchen Felker Martin, and this is a book that I believe is supposed to come out last year, and so I'm still anticipating it. This one is set in the 90s following 5 queer children that are sent off by their religious parents to this conversion camp in order to quote-unquote fix them. So they're sent off to the Utah desert. When they are working there, they are just worked to death by the religious zealots who run this camp and are trying to change them. However, they become delirious, they start to have dreams, and they believe that something in the mountains is calling or speaking to them, telling them, or warning them rather, that the children that leave this place come back changed. So given this author's previous work, I'm expecting this to be a biting social commentary on the experience of being queer in North America today, the conversations surrounding acceptance and the prejudice, and the horrible things that we do in order to fix those that aren't actually broken. So this is a book that is right up my alley. It's things that I feel very passionate about, and I'm excited to see this from this author's work. I like their previous work, or appreciate it rather, but I'm just not a fan of post-apocalyptic fiction. Given the state of our world, I don't need to read about that right now, but this one, however, sounds a lot more up my alley, and I'm really hoping it'll be a new favorite because I tend to like these cutting stories, and I'm expecting this one to have a lot of bite. So that's it for this video here. As always, let me know down below in the comments which books you're planning on checking out for yourself, and a huge disclaimer that these dates are subject to change. I feel like it's always, whenever I post these videos, something immediately changes the day that it goes up live. So if you're new to my channel and want to stick around and subscribe, I hope you do. I do read a lot of horror as well as further science fiction, fantasy, and yes, I'm going to do the same anticipated releases for SFF, so stay tuned for that. And the reason again I like to do these videos is to talk about new releases, but my real purpose again is to come back and properly review these titles once I get them, whether they come from publishers, my library, etc., because I like to help other people to decide which books are worth your time. All these books have so much hype online. The marketers and publicists are going nuts talking about the new titles as they are getting released, and so I like to let you know which ones are good, which ones miss the mark, and hopefully decide which ones are worth your time and money. So if that sounds good, I hope you stick around. If you want to support me with this video here, I appreciate a big thumbs up. You can drop a comment, even if it's just a ghost or a spooky face. And if you want to hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.